On a quiet stretch of highway surrounded by dense woods, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the road. Evelyn Hartley sat behind the wheel of her sleek luxury car, gripping it tightly as she tried to coax some life back into the engine. But no matter how many times she turned the key, the vehicle only sputtered and groaned before falling silent again. Frustrated, she stepped out onto the asphalt, her high heels clicking against the surface. The air was thick with humidity, and beads of sweat began forming on her forehead. Evelyn glanced around, taking in the emptiness of the scene. There were no other cars in sight, just miles of trees stretching endlessly in both directions. She pulled out her phone, ready to call for roadside assistance, but hesitated. Her battery was dangerously low, and reception seemed spotty at best. Letting out a sigh, she leaned against the hood of her car, wondering how things had gone so wrong so quickly. Just an hour ago, she'd been cruising along smoothly, heading home after closing yet another multi-million-dollar deal. Now here she was, stranded, sweaty, and completely out of her element. As if on cue, the distant rumble of an engine broke through the stillness. Evelyn looked up to see a beat-up old truck approaching from the horizon. It slowed down as it neared her, then came to a stop just behind her car. Out climbed a tall man with broad shoulders and skin the color of rich mahogany. His arms were toned, his hands stained with grease, and his face bore the kind of warm smile that could instantly put someone at ease. This was Marcus Johnson, though. Evelyn didn't know his name yet. "Car trouble?" Marcus asked, his voice deep and steady. Evelyn nodded, feeling a mix of relief and skepticism. "Yeah, it just died on me. I don't know what's wrong with it." Marcus walked over to inspect the situation. He peered under the hood, running his fingers over various parts while making soft noises of assessment. Evelyn watched him curiously. Despite his rugged appearance, there was something undeniably competent about the way he moved. He wasn't flashy or polished like the people she usually interacted with, but there was a quiet confidence about him that intrigued her. "You're not from around here, are you?" Marcus said without looking up. It wasn't a question so much as an observation. "No," Evelyn replied. "I'm not used to being stuck like this." Marcus chuckled lightly. "Don't worry. Happens to everyone sooner or later. Looks like your alternator might be shot. Lucky for you, I've got tools in my truck." He straightened up and gave her a reassuring grin before heading back to retrieve what he needed. As he worked, they started talking. Evelyn learned that Marcus grew up bouncing between foster homes, teaching himself mechanics because he loved fixing things. In turn, she shared bits and pieces of her own story, how she built her empire from scratch, working tirelessly to get where she was today. They came from different worlds, but somehow their conversation flowed easily. Despite her initial doubts, Evelyn found herself relaxing in Marcus's presence. He wasn't judgmental or intimidated by her status. Instead, he treated her like anyone else. And for the first time in years, she felt truly seen, not as a millionaire mogul, but simply as a person. Little did either of them know this chance encounter would lead to something far greater than either could have imagined. As Marcus continued working on Evelyn's car, the two fell into an easy rhythm of conversation. Evelyn leaned against the side of her vehicle, watching him with a mix of curiosity and admiration. Despite his modest appearance, there was something magnetic about Marcus. His calm demeanor, the way he handled each tool with precision, and the quiet confidence that radiated from him. It wasn't just his skill with cars that intrigued her, it was his story. "So you taught yourself all this?" Evelyn asked, gesturing to the engine bay where Marcus was carefully tightening bolts. He glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag before answering. "Yeah, mostly. I didn't have much growing up, so I figured if I wanted something fixed, I'd better learn how to do it myself. Plus, I've always liked taking things apart and putting them back together. Feels like solving a puzzle." Evelyn nodded thoughtfully. She could relate to that feeling of piecing things together, though in her case it had been building a business rather than repairing engines. Still, she admired his resourcefulness. Most people would have given up after facing the challenges Marcus described, growing up in foster care, moving from home to home, never really knowing stability. but he had turned those hardships into strength. "You must be proud of what you've accomplished," she said softly. Marcus shrugged, a hint of humility in his voice. "I try not to think too much about it. Life's got a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. All I can do is keep moving forward." There was wisdom in his words, a depth that surprised Evelyn. For someone who hadn't grown up with privilege or opportunities handed to him, Marcus seemed remarkably grounded. He spoke with clarity and purpose, as if he understood exactly who he was and where he stood in the world. It made her wonder how different her own life might have been if she'd encountered someone like him earlier. Someone who reminded her that success wasn't just about money or titles. While they talked, Marcus worked steadily, his movements efficient and deliberate. Every now and then he'd pause to explain what he was doing, breaking down complex mechanical terms into simple language that even Evelyn could understand. She appreciated the effort. It wasn't often people took the time to make sure she followed along. Usually they assumed she wouldn't care or already knew everything. But Marcus treated her differently, speaking to her as an equal. At one point, Evelyn noticed a small scar on his forearm and asked about it. Marcus chuckled, brushing it off as nothing more than a childhood mishap involving a bicycle and a rusty fence. The story made her smile, but it also deepened her respect for him. Even scars told stories, and Marcus wore his without shame, almost like badges of resilience. Time seemed to slip away as they chatted, the awkwardness of their initial meeting fading completely. Evelyn found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation, which was rare for her. In her world, interactions were often transactional. People wanted something from her, whether it was advice, funding, or connections. With Marcus, there was none of that. He wasn't trying to impress her or win her favor. He was simply being himself. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the highway, Marcus finally stepped back from the car. "All right, give it a try now," he said, nodding toward the driver's seat. Evelyn slid behind the wheel, turning the key hesitantly. To her relief, the engine roared to life, smooth and steady. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You're amazing," she said, stepping out to face him. "Thank you so much." Marcus waved off her gratitude with a grin. "Just doing my job. Glad I could help." But as Evelyn looked at him, she felt a strange pang of familiarity, though she couldn't quite place it. There was something about Marcus, something beyond his kindness and skill that tugged at her memory. She pushed the thought aside for now, focusing instead on thanking him properly. Little did she know, their connection ran far deeper than either of them could have guessed at that moment. As Evelyn stood there, thanking Marcus for fixing her car, her eyes drifted to the small silver necklace hanging around his neck. It was simple, yet striking. A delicate chain with a tiny anchor pendant dangling from it. Something about the necklace caught her attention, stirring a faint memory deep within her. At first, she thought it might be because the design was unique or because it seemed oddly out of place on someone like Marcus, who otherwise wore practical, no-frills clothing. But as she stared at it longer, a strange feeling washed over her, a mixture of curiosity and unease. "That's an interesting necklace," Evelyn said casually, pointing to it. "Does it mean something special?" Marcus glanced down at the pendant, his fingers instinctively brushing against it. For a brief moment, his expression softened as if he were recalling a distant memory. Then, with a small smile, he replied, "Yeah, it does. It belonged to my mom. Well, my biological mom, I guess. She left it with me when I was a baby." Evelyn froze, her heart skipping a beat. The casual tone of his voice didn't match the storm brewing inside her. She forced herself to stay calm, not wanting to betray the whirlwind of emotions swirling in her mind. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to sound nonchalant but failing slightly. Her voice wavered just enough to hint at her growing anxiety. Marcus shrugged, unaware of the effect his words were having on her. "I don't remember much about her. I was only a baby when she gave me up. All I know is that she left this necklace with me, along with a note saying, 'Keep this close, it's your connection to home.'" He paused, looking at the pendant thoughtfully. I've kept it ever since. It's the only thing I have from her." Evelyn felt her knees weaken. Though she managed to steady herself by leaning lightly against her car, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on her chest. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. How could this be happening? The necklace. The story. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? She had seen that exact necklace before. Not just once, but countless times throughout her childhood. Her father had given it to her years ago, calling it a family heirloom. When Evelyn became pregnant at 22, scared and alone, she had clung to the necklace as a source of comfort during those difficult months, and then, one fateful night, she left it behind, at an orphanage, wrapped tightly in a blanket with her newborn son. The memories came rushing back like a flood. The cold hospital room, the weight of the decision she'd made, the ache of walking away from the tiny bundle in her arms. Over time, she had buried those feelings deep inside, focusing instead on building a new life for herself. She never spoke of what happened, not even to her closest friends. Yet here she was, staring at the very same necklace now resting around the neck of a man who looked at her with kindness and openness. "Where did you say you grew up?" Evelyn asked abruptly, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. Marcus raised an eyebrow at the sudden change in tone but answered honestly. "Mostly in foster homes. I bounced around a lot after whoever left. Me decided they couldn't keep me. Why?" Evelyn didn't respond right away. Instead, she took a step back, her mind racing. Could this really be him? Was it possible that fate, or maybe even destiny, had brought them together after all these years? She needed answers, but she also knew she couldn't blurt out the truth without thinking carefully. This wasn't just about her anymore, it involved Marcus too and whatever bond they might share. For now, she simply smiled weakly, hoping to mask her inner turmoil. "No reason," she said softly. "Just curious." But as Marcus returned to packing up his tools, oblivious to the emotional earthquake unfolding within Evelyn, she couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. That night, Evelyn lay awake in her luxurious penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling as memories she had buried for decades resurfaced with startling clarity. The image of Marcus's necklace kept flashing in her mind, refusing to let her rest. It was the same anchor pendant. She was certain of it. Her father had given it to her when she was a teenager, calling it a symbol of strength and stability. "No matter how rough the waters get," he'd said, "an anchor will always hold you steady." She had cherished those words, carrying the necklace everywhere, even during the darkest days of her life. And then came that night, the one she had tried so hard to erase from her memory. She had been young, barely 22, and completely unprepared for motherhood. Alone and ashamed, she had convinced herself that giving her baby up was the best choice. She remembered wrapping him in a soft blanket, placing the necklace beside him, and walking away without looking back. Leaving him at the orphanage felt like tearing a piece of her soul out, but she told herself it was for the greater good. Over time, she built her empire, burying the pain under layers of success and ambition. But now, staring at the city lights, outside her window, she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The next morning, Evelyn found herself unable to focus on work. Her assistant noticed her distraction and gently reminded her of an important meeting, but Evelyn waved her off, claiming she needed some personal time. Instead, she drove back to the highway where Marcus had helped her the day ago. She didn't know why she went there. It wasn't logical. But something inside her urged her to retrace their steps, hoping for answers, or maybe even another chance encounter. Her instincts paid off. As she approached the spot, she saw Marcus's old truck parked nearby. He was crouched beside it, tinkering with something under the hood. When he heard her car pull up, he looked up, surprised to see her again. "Evelyn?" he called out, straightening up. "Is everything okay? Did the car break down again?" She shook her head, stepping out slowly. No, the car's fine," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I came to talk to you." Marcus frowned, sensing the seriousness in her tone. Talk to me about what? Evelyn hesitated, her heart pounding. How could she possibly explain this without sounding insane? Taking a deep breath, she decided to start from the beginning. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Something I've never told anyone before. He crossed his arms, studying her intently. All right, go ahead. For the first time in years, Evelyn spoke openly about her past, the struggles, the shame, and the impossible decision she had made all those years ago. She described the night she left her newborn son at the orphanage, the necklace she placed with him, and the emptiness that followed her ever since. Tears streamed down her face as she recounted the details, each word feeling like a weight lifting off her chest. When she finally mentioned the necklace, Marcus's eyes widened in shock. He reached up instinctively, touching the pendant around his neck. Wait, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you saying you're my mother? Evelyn nodded, tears blurring her vision. I think so, Marcus. I don't have all the answers, but it makes sense, doesn't it? The necklace, your age, everything. Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing. He had spent years wondering about his biological parents, imagining who they might be and why they gave him up. Now, standing face to face, with one of them he felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, hope, all colliding at once. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, charged with decades of unspoken questions and unresolved feelings. Finally, Marcus broke the quiet. Why now? He asked, his voice strained. Why are you telling me this after all these years? Evelyn swallowed hard, meeting his gaze. Because I saw the necklace and realized it was you. Because I owe you the truth, Marcus. And because I want to make things right if you'll let me. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He turned away, staring off into the distance as he processed everything she had said. Evelyn waited anxiously, unsure whether he would forgive her or walk away forever. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for certain. Her life and Marcus's would never be the same again. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread ready to snap at any moment. Evelyn stood there, her hands trembling as she waited for Marcus to say something. Anything. She could see the conflict brewing in his eyes. Anger, confusion, maybe even a flicker of hope. But he didn't speak. Instead, he turned away, pacing slowly along the side of the road, his boots crunching against the gravel. Evelyn wanted to follow him, to explain herself further, but she forced herself to stay put. This wasn't about her anymore, it was about Marcus and how he chose to process the bombshell she had just dropped. She owed him that much, the space to think, to feel, to decide what came next. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus finally stopped pacing and looked back at her. His expression was unreadable, a mix of emotions battling beneath the surface. You're really my mom? He asked, his voice low and steady, though there was an edge of disbelief in it. Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Marcus, I am. He exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. I don't know what to say, he admitted. This is a lot to take in. I understand, Evelyn said quickly, her voice cracking. I shouldn't have sprung this on you like this. I saw the necklace and everything clicked. I couldn't keep it from you, not after realizing who you are. Marcus shook his head, still processing. Why didn't you keep me? Why give me up? It was the question Evelyn had feared most, the one she'd been asking herself for years. She took a shaky breath, choosing her words carefully. I was young, Marcus. So young and so scared. I didn't have anyone to turn to. No family or support system. I thought giving you up was the best thing I could do for you, for both of us. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me, that someone else could give you the life I couldn't. Marcus stared at her, his jaw tightening. But did you ever think about me after that? Did you wonder where I ended up? What kind of life I was living? The raw emotion in his voice hit Evelyn like a punch to the chest. She swallowed hard, fighting back fresh tears. Of course I did, she whispered. Every single day, but I told myself it was too late, that I'd already made my choice, and then I threw myself into work trying to forget. But I never stopped thinking about you, Marcus. Never. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their shared history hung heavy in the air, undeniable and unavoidable. Finally, Marcus let out a long sigh and walked back toward her. He stopped a few feet away, his arms crossed as he studied her face. I need time, he said firmly. This is a lot. I can't just flip a switch and trust you, not after everything, but... He hesitated, glancing down at the necklace around his neck. If you're telling the truth, if you really are my mom, then maybe we can figure this out. Together. Relief washed over Evelyn, though she knew they were far from resolving anything. Still, Marcus's willingness to consider a future with her meant more than he could possibly understand. Thank you, she said softly. That's all I'm asking for. A chance to make things right. Marcus nodded, his expression softening slightly. We'll see, but don't expect this to be easy. I've spent my whole life wondering about my parents, imagining who they were and why they left me. Finding out one of them is standing right here. He trailed off, shaking his head. It's going to take some getting used to. Evelyn nodded, understanding completely. I'll do whatever it takes, Marcus. Whatever you need. As they stood there, the sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the highway. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope, a fragile but undeniable connection forming between them. It wouldn't be smooth sailing, they both knew that. But as Marcus tucked the necklace back under his shirt and gave her a small, tentative smile, Evelyn realized that this was only the beginning of their journey. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn and Marcus began meeting regularly. At first, their interactions were cautious, like two strangers tiptoeing around a fragile bridge that might collapse at any moment. They started with coffee at a small diner near Marcus's garage, a neutral place where neither of them felt out of their element. Evelyn would arrive in her sleek car, dressed impeccably as always, while Marcus showed up in his worn jeans and work boots, smelling faintly of motor oil. Despite their differences, they found comfort in these meetings, slowly unraveling years of silence and unanswered questions. Evelyn made it clear from the start that she wasn't there to force anything or rush Marcus into feeling something he wasn't ready for. Take all the time you need, she told him during one of their early conversations. I'm not here to disrupt your life, I just want to be part of it if you'll let me. Marcus appreciated her patience, though he still struggled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he wanted to believe her, to trust that this wealthy, powerful woman truly regretted leaving him behind and genuinely cared about making amends. But on the other hand, decades of wondering about his biological parents had left scars that couldn't heal overnight. He often found himself replaying their initial conversation in his mind, searching for signs that she might be insincere. So far, he hadn't found any, but trusting someone, especially after so many years of uncertainty, was harder than he'd expected. Their talks ranged from lighthearted topics, like Marcus's love for restoring old cars and Evelyn's fascination with technology, to heavier subjects such as the pain of growing up without knowing his roots. One afternoon, as they sat sipping coffee, Marcus brought up something that had been weighing on him. Do you ever feel guilty? He asked bluntly, catching Evelyn off guard. She hesitated before answering, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Every day, she admitted softly. Not a single day goes by when I don't think about what I gave up, the life we could have had together. But guilt doesn't change the past, Marcus. All I can do now is try to make things better, starting today. Her honesty struck a chord with Marcus. For so long he had imagined his biological parents as faceless figures who abandoned him without a second thought. Seeing Evelyn, flawed, vulnerable, and deeply human, made him realize that people are rarely as simple as they seem. Her remorse felt genuine, and over time he began to let his guard down. During one of their meetings, Evelyn surprised Marcus by asking about his dreams and aspirations. What do you want out of life? She asked. If money or resources weren't an issue, what would you do? Marcus chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. Honestly, I've always dreamed of opening my own garage. Not some fancy dealership, but a place where people like me can bring their cars without worrying about being ripped off. A shop that feels like home, you know? Evelyn smiled, her eyes lighting up. That's incredible, Marcus. Why haven't you done it yet? Money, mostly, he admitted. Starting a business takes capital, and I've been saving little by little. It's tough, but I'll get there eventually. Without hesitation, Evelyn offered to help. Let me invest in your dream, she said earnestly. Not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness or anything like that, but because I believe in you. You deserve this, Marcus. At first, Marcus resisted, wary of accepting too much too soon. But Evelyn insisted, framing it as a partnership rather than charity. Think of it this way, we're building something together, something meaningful. That's what families do. They support each other. Eventually, Marcus agreed, though only after making it clear that he intended to pay her back every penny. As they shook hands on the deal, a spark of excitement ignited between them. For the first time, they weren't just mother and son reconnecting. They were collaborators, working toward a shared goal. In the months that followed, their bond deepened. Evelyn introduced Marcus to her world of entrepreneurship, teaching him how to navigate contracts, marketing, and finances. In return, Marcus showed her the value of hard work and authenticity, qualities she realized she had lost sight of in her climb to success. Together, they discovered common ground, not just as family members but as individuals striving to create something lasting. Though challenges remained, the foundation they were building felt solid. Evelyn no longer saw Marcus as the baby she once left behind. Instead, she admired the strong, compassionate man he had become. And Marcus, for his part, began to see Evelyn not just as the woman who gave him up, but as someone willing to fight for their relationship. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time they both dared to hope, for healing, for connection, and for a future they could share. Months passed, and the bond between Evelyn and Marcus grew stronger with each passing day. What started as tentative meetings over coffee evolved into shared laughter, heartfelt conversations, and even arguments that only brought them closer together. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they were learning how to navigate their newfound relationship step by step. For Evelyn, it was a chance to rediscover what truly mattered in life: connection, love, and family. For Marcus, it was an opportunity to understand where he came from while forging a future on his own terms. True to her word, Evelyn helped Marcus bring his dream of opening a garage to life. Together, they scouted locations, designed the layout, and sourced equipment. The shop wasn't flashy or extravagant. It didn't need to be. It was warm, welcoming, and built with purpose. Marcus insisted on naming it Anchor Auto Repair, a nod to the necklace that had sparked their reunion. When Evelyn heard the name for the first time, she smiled through tears, realizing just how much that tiny pendant had come to symbolize their journey. The grand opening arrived sooner than either of them expected. On the big day, the parking lot buzzed with activity. Friends, customers, and local business owners gathered outside, eager to see what Marcus had created. Evelyn stood proudly beside him, watching as he greeted everyone with genuine warmth and gratitude. Gone was the awkwardness of their early days. Now, there was an ease between them, a quiet understanding that transcended words. As Marcus cut the ribbon and welcomed his first official customers, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. She remembered the fear in his eyes when she first told him the truth about their connection, the doubt, the anger, the hesitation. But she also remembered the small moments that bridged the gap between them, the way he laughed at her jokes, the way he listened intently when she spoke, and the way he slowly began to trust her, piece by piece. Later that evening, after the crowd had thinned and the last customer left, Marcus turned to Evelyn with a thoughtful expression. "I've been thinking," he said, leaning against the counter, "about everything. And I wanted to say thank you." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, surprised. For what? For believing in me, he replied simply. For sticking around, even when I gave you every reason not to. Most people would have walked away after the way I acted at first, but you didn't. You stayed. Her throat tightened, and she blinked back tears. Because you're worth it, Marcus. Every single second of this has been worth it. He nodded, looking down at his hands for a moment before meeting her gaze again. You know, I used to think finding my mom would fix everything, like it would magically make all the missing pieces fall into place. But now I realize it's not about fixing anything. It's about building something new, something real. Evelyn reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. That's exactly what we're doing. We're building a family, Marcus. One that might look different from others, but one that's ours. Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and lit up his entire face. Yeah, he said, softly. Ours. As they locked up the garage together and walked to their cars under the starlit sky, Evelyn felt a profound sense of peace. For years, she had chased success, thinking it would fill the void inside her. But standing here now, side by side with her son, she finally understood what it meant to be whole. Money and achievements could never replace the joy of reconnecting with someone who shared her blood and her heart. Their story wasn't without its scars. There were still moments of tension, reminders of the years they had lost. But those moments no longer defined them. Instead, they served as stepping stones toward something greater: forgiveness, acceptance, and unconditional love. As Marcus drove off into the night, the anchor pendant glinting faintly around his neck, Evelyn knew one thing for certain. They were going to be okay. Months turned into a year, and the bond between Evelyn and Marcus continued to flourish. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, and raw emotions. But they faced them head-on, choosing honesty over silence every time. They weren't just rebuilding their past. They were creating something entirely new, a connection rooted in resilience and mutual respect. Anchor. Auto repair became more than just a garage. It became a cornerstone of the community. Marcus poured his heart into the business, treating each customer like family and ensuring that no one felt overlooked or underserved. Word spread quickly about the mechanic with the kind smile and unmatched skill, and soon, people from neighboring towns were driving miles to visit Anchor Auto. For Marcus, it wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about giving back to the world in the same way he had been given a second chance at life. Evelyn played her part too, not by hovering but by supporting Marcus in ways she never imagined possible. She attended local events, helped organize fundraisers for struggling families in the area, and even volunteered at a nearby youth center where Marcus occasionally taught kids basic car maintenance. It was during these moments that Evelyn realized how much she had missed out on by focusing solely on her career. Her wealth had given her power, yes, but working alongside Marcus showed her the true value of humility, hard work, and human connection. 1. Evening. As they sat together on the porch of Evelyn's penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights, Marcus turned to her with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? He asked. If we'd found each other sooner? Evelyn sighed, leaning back in her chair. All the time, she admitted. But I've stopped dwelling on the what-ifs. What matters is that we're here now. Together. Marcus nodded, gazing out at the skyline. Yeah, I guess you're right. Still, it's crazy to think about how everything worked out. If your car hadn't broken down that day, or if I hadn't noticed the necklace, Evelyn finished, smiling softly. They both laughed, shaking their heads at the serendipity of it all. Life had a funny way of bringing people together when they least expected it, and sometimes those connections turned out to be the most meaningful of all. As time went on, Evelyn began sharing stories about her father, the man who had originally given her the anchor necklace. She told Marcus about his wisdom, his love for the sea, and how he always said an anchor keeps you grounded no matter how stormy life gets. Hearing these stories made Marcus feel closer to the grandfather he would never meet, filling another void he hadn't realized existed. In return, Marcus introduced Evelyn to the foster families who had raised him, showing her the people and places that shaped him into the man he was today. These visits brought tears to Evelyn's eyes, not out of sadness but out of gratitude. Gratitude that, despite everything, Marcus had grown up surrounded by kindness and care, even if it hadn't come from her. The necklace, once a symbol of loss and abandonment, took on new meaning for both of them. For Marcus, it represented finding home, not in a place but in the unconditional love of a mother who had finally returned to him. For Evelyn, it reminded her that no success in the world could compare to the joy of reconnecting with her son. The anniversary of their reunion, Marcus surprised Evelyn with a gift, a matching anchor pendant, this time engraved with the words, "Together Forever." When she opened the small velvet box, tears streamed down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "No," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for coming back to me." As they stood there, arms wrapped around each other, neither needed to say anything more. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, they knew that, but they also knew they had each other, and that was enough.